We've come to altar calls after altar call and invitation after invitation. We've laid our lives down before Christ again and again and again, and yet somehow we're still very much alive. The veil of selfishness and self-interest and vanity and pride is still not rent. The rocks of our heart are still not split. We still remain dead and in our tombs. So I'm just going to invite you to come to this cross, the total negation of all of your life, the doing away with yourself in the yielding up of the ghost. If his glory is going to be made manifest in the earth, it shall be only through his resurrection life to those who have been joined with him in death and in burial and have been raised with him into that newness. A writer says that the cross is the utterly incommensurable factor in the revelation of God, and that we have become far too used to it. We have made a theory of salvation out of it. We have sentimentalized and distorted and taken the sting out of it. We have negated its death and suffering. It needs to be recalled as an event, and we need to make it for ourselves an event, the central, pivotal event of all our faith in life. All must go dark for us, become as night, in the daytime of our comfortable religious understanding. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vestures did they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there, and set up over his head his accusation written, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then were there two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, "Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross." Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God." The thieves also which were crucified with him cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, "This man calleth for Elias." And straightway one of them ran, and took a sponge, and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. The rest said, "Let be. Let us see whether Elias will come to save him." Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake, and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." You're going to have to think about what I'm saying tonight. This is thoughtful and deliberate and important. My subject tonight is the crucifixion of Jesus. More accurately, the cross of the crucified Christ. Paul said, "I'm determined to know nothing but Christ and him crucified." I think that was a wise determination, and it probably cost him much. It probably took a supreme act of will and discipline, determination not to know the things that were extraneous, though interesting. How many are hearing me now whose minds are either a battlefield or a playground for all kinds of things? If we knew the importance of Christ and him crucified, we would clear the deck and not allow our minds to be a mishmash of all kinds of things until God has himself established an understanding that is utterly fundamental to our faith and to our walk. Christ and him crucified. I think that it's the answer to the kinds of vagaries and self-imaginings to which we are prone. Without exception, if our Jesus is one other than that which was crucified, it's a self-serving Jesus which we have projected out of the fancies of our own mind. We need desperately and urgently to know him exactly as he is, radically and utterly, and I have a suspicion that he is nowhere presented as the reflection and the image of God more accurately than in his suffering and death. That there has been no thing more grossly neglected in modern Christendom than the cross of Christ Jesus. I think that we have suffered enormously for the avoidance of the subject, because the cross itself is ruthless and absolute. It is, if you can understand it, a plumb line from God. It's an unswerving standard by which everything should be conformed and measured. If some other hokey substitute has been put in its place, though we allude to it as the cross, if it be not the cross of the crucified Christ, everything is going to be out of variance and out of whack, which I believe is the case and the condition of modern Christianity tonight. Is not the root of all of our ills, our strifes, our divisions, our fears, our jealousies, our ambitions, in the last analysis, the failure to radically apprehend God as he is. I get the impression many times hearing what we call worship that the Jesus who is being celebrated is some kind of buddy-buddy. He's the one who provides health instead of sickness, prosperity instead of poverty, and will see to every material need that assures our well-being. If there's any false image which will redound to things false in our own life, it can only be corrected by knowing God as he is, where he has presented himself unsparingly and accurately, and which I believe is done nowhere else better than in the suffering and death of Jesus. The cross was unanimously considered the most horrible form of death, and the punishment, if applied to freemen, was only used in the case of the vilest criminals. The one to be crucified was stripped naked of all his clothes, and then followed the most awful moment of all. He was laid upon the implement of torture. His arms were stretched along the cross beams, and at the center of the open palms the point of a huge iron nail was placed, which by the blow of a mallet was driven home into the wood. Then through either foot separately or possibly together, as they were placed one over the other, another huge nail tore its way through the quivering flesh. There was about the center of the cross a wooden projection strong enough to support at least in part a human body, which soon became a weight of agony. Then the accursed tree with its living human burden was slowly heaved up, and the end fixed firmly in a hole in the ground. The feet were but a little raised above the earth. The victim was in full reach of every hand that might choose to strike. Dizziness, cramps, thirst, starvation, sleeplessness, traumatic fever, tetanus, publicity of shame, long continuance of torment, horror of anticipation, mortification of untended wounds, all intensified just up to the point at which they can be endured at all, but stopping just short of the point which would give to the sufferer the relief of unconsciousness. The lacerated veins and crushed tendons throbbed with incessant anguish. The wounds, inflamed by exposure, gradually gangrened. The arteries, especially of the head and stomach, became swollen and oppressed with surcharged blood. And while each variety of misery went on gradually increasing, there was added to them the intolerable pang of a burning and raging thirst. Such was the death to which Christ was doomed. We had the occasion just a few days ago to visit a Catholic shrine, and the stations of the cross were enclosed in glass, and you need not even get out of your car. There was a road and you could ride from station to station. But I'll tell you that it didn't do a thing for me spiritually. If it did anything, it knotted something in my gut, because the figures depicted in the stations of the cross were so saccharine, so sugary, so antiseptic, so bloodless, so clean, so smooth. It was sentimental rather than horrible, for which reason I would prefer no depictions rather than the clumsy or the sentimental attempts of men, which in the end result in having our knowledge of God distorted.